Okay, this is a guide aimed at being an entry-level introduction to fist weaving in Dragonflight. The general goal of fist weaving is to obviously keep your group alive while doing as much damage as possible and using your utility. For the absolute new players picking up Mistweaver for the first time, as a fist weaver you are generally going to do as much damage as possible by either spamming spinning crane kick is your AoE filler ability, or by standing on top of your feline stomp and pressing tiger's palm, blackout kick, repeat forever. As far as keeping your team alive, as long as you do those things on top of feline stomp, you will smart heal the allies in your group within a 30-yard range for 150% of the damage done by those abilities, so long as you've taken the Ancient Teachings talent and you have procced it by either pressing feline stomp or essence font. The reason you Tiger's Palm and then Blackout Kick is because Tiger's Palm applies a buff. It means the next time you Blackout Kick, you proc an extra Blackout Kick, and with talents you can proc extra on the extra. Blackout Kick has a baseline very short cooldown of, I believe, 3 seconds. But that is the very rough outline of what you're trying to do, and I'll go into the specifics later on. First up, we have talents. So the class tree is going to basically consist of a couple of mandatory throughput nodes, and then a smattering of you basically getting to pick your defensives and pick your utility. You have to take Rising Sun Kick, have to take the Vivify nodes, Improve Vivify and Vivification. That's a mouthful. You're pretty much always going to want the extra charge roll. You should always, I would say, take Tiger's Lust. This is useful. It isn't quite as good as Blessing of Freedom, because Blessing of Freedom makes the target immune to snares and movement impairing effects, whereas Tiger's Lust just removes it on application. But it is a nice speed boost for someone in your party or to clear a debuff. The roots in Azure Vaults and things like that, it's quite handy for. You're also always going to want to take Improved Detox. That's just mandatory. And I can't see any reason why anyone wouldn't take 3% less damage taken at all times, which is effectively your top tier of talents locked in. Now you have a few options here. A lot of people skip this right-hand branch for Fortifying Brew and instead focus on more utility and better damage options in the middle of the tree. A lot of this is going to be up to you. The only nodes I would say are mandatory is you absolutely need to have fast feet, which means you need to take either the increased all damage taken or Transcendence or Spearhanded Strike. It's pick your poison here, really. I'm going to take Transcendence because I know it's a button I want all the time. And then you need the 2 points in fast feet. And the rest is very much largely up to how you want to play. Now there's 20 points available at the moment. Most people go down for Summoned White Tiger statue, and these two nodes for the passive proc damage on Resonant Fists is also quite good. This is mainly just for Mistweavers who want to do the most damage in keys, which is, I mean, that's always going to be useful. There's a reason why everyone takes this, but the main reason is that the other capstones just aren't very useful to you as a Fistweaver. You aren't going to be spending a significant amount of time, or really any time, channeling Soothing Mist, so Jade Serpent statue is largely useless, and the Black Ox statue is, at least with current tuning, unfortunately worse than useless. It's a noob trap. It pulses effectively no threat. This isn't the kind of cooldown that you can press when a tank dies or the tank's in trouble or the healer gets aggro or anything like that, because it doesn't do anything. I mean, from the testing I did with this in Mythic Plus and even Heroics, if I healed myself, like if there was a mob, like the tank died and there was one last straggler mob or something in the pack and it was punching me, I would drop the Black Ox statue and heal myself, and just the act of healing myself would keep aggro of the mob on me. So at least at the moment, the only real choice you have is Summon White Tiger statue. Now, if you don't want to have that, if you don't think the damage is that important, because it isn't as strong as it used to be, you can also go ahead and take a lot of the other nodes further up the tree and just not take a capstone talent. I would say Ring of Peace is great, Diffuse Magic is great, Dampen Harm's great. Taking Chi Burst can be quite handy, and I'll explain about that later. And if you do want Close to Heart, which unfortunately isn't leaked anymore, but it's still quite good, then you have to take the Expel Harm node, which is fairly useless, but still whatever. We're going to take Disable, even though I never use it. Fortifying Brew, why not? Just because I think Chi Torpedo or Celerity are really good nodes. They're just good choices to have. Now, I have actually played around with a build that basically just takes all of the group buff nodes. I wish Windwalking connected to Resonant Fists, but I mean, it's whatever. You can take whatever you want here. The bounce back is actually quite okay as well. I can see this being good in high keys. And same with their Save Them All. There's no internal cooldown on this. So if you think you're going to be healing very spiky damage or people are going to be regularly dropping quite low, this can be very useful. But that'll do the class tree for now. Like I said, if I wanted damage, I would take Resonant Fists and summon White Tiger Statue. I also think Escape from Reality can be quite good if you are willing to play around it. And as for the spec tree, there are a couple of different Fistweaver variations that you can go for, but the main ones are going to be quite similar until the final couple of rows of talents. So you need Renewing Mist, obviously. You need Thunder Focus T. You need Renewing Mist has 2 charges, mostly because you need to get to Rapid Defense. It's just crazy strong, that node. And you also need Teachings of the Monastery. I don't take Spirit of the Crane, but if you think mana is going to be an issue, this talent's actually a bit of a noob trap at the moment as well. In any situation where you're doing a lot of fist weaving, you're not going to have to spend mana for the most part. And in any situation where you need mana, you're not fist weaving, because it's the casting aspect of Mistweaver that has issues with mana at the moment, not the fist weaving style. I take the Life Cocoon applies Rem and Enveloping just because it's a really nice emergency heal. It makes Life Cocoon feel much better. But like I said, you definitely want Rapid Infusion or Rapid Diffusion. I wish Zen Pulse was good. At the moment it's tuned quite underwhelmingly, so I skip it. But as for the rest of the nodes, you are primarily focused on these 4 nodes on the left here, the Phaline branch. So you want Yulon's Whisper, because like I said, you're not taking Spirit of the Crane. And the rest is kind of up to you. Most people go through the middle to grab the Celestial Invoke and the associated talents with it. It is a good way to go. If you don't feel like it's necessary, then you can take all the other utility, and all you're really worried about is getting the 4 points for the Phaline node. You absolutely want Misty Peaks, and you absolutely want Rising Mist. I also think Dancing Mists is very good, but for now we'll just go through the middle like normal. You definitely want Revival. It's a great emergency heal. This last node in the second tier is really dealer's choice. Some people go Spirit of the Crane just because they're used to it. Uplifted Spirits can also in some situations be quite good. Overflowing Mists at the moment is extremely strong. There were quite a few, when I was testing this earlier in the beta, there were quite a few heroic keys where the Overflowing Mists talent healed for more than my Enveloping Mists did. I expect this to get changed at some point. I'm pretty sure Blizzard will quietly add a eternal cooldown on it like they had in the past when this was in the game in previous expansions. But at the moment it doesn't have an internal cooldown, so it does crazy amounts of healing. And you want the Phaline nodes. Obviously you need Ancient Teachings. And then at this point we have 5 nodes left and we want Rising Mist. You can either take the Celestial choice option, or you can take Thunder Focus T has 2 charges. Then you take Misty Peaks and go for Rising Mists. At the final point, most people take Tea of Plenty, just for the chance at an extra Rem or Rising Sun Kick when you TFT. But if you wanted to, you could also opt for the second choice node, or you could go for Life Cycles or Mana Tea if you thought you were going to be pressing more Essence Fonts, or there was a boss or 2 in a key you were looking at doing that had a lot of anti-melee mechanics, or situations in which you couldn't fist weave and you needed to do some more casting and you were worried about your mana. You also have the option of the Refreshing Jade Wind or Mistwrap choice node. Unfortunately, the extra 1 second duration on Mistwrap does not affect the proc of Enveloping from Renewing Mist on Misty Peaks. But for now, those will be the talents. So you're pressing Phaline Stomp. You ideally always want to be fighting on top of Phaline Stomp, or else your Blackout Kick won't cleave and your Tiger's Palm won't cleave. And you won't get the added RSK reset chance, and your Crane Kick won't heal, and all that kind of stuff. So pretty much your number 1 priority for fist weaving is always to be on Phaline Stomp. And it resets quite often just from normal abilities. The more haste you have, the more often you'll proc the resets. And also, if you need to, you can stand on a Phaline Stomp and press Chi Burst, and every ally and enemy that you hit with Chi Burst counts as a separate roll chance or interaction or whatever with the reset chance of Phaline Stomp. So very often, if you hit 5, 10 units or something with Chi Burst, you're pretty much guaranteed to reset your Phaline Stomp. Phaline Stomp also will proc your Ancient Teachings buff for 15 seconds, which causes your damage to smart heal. Now, it will smart heal in the sense that the healing will go onto targets that are injured, but it won't prioritize the most injured targets. Once you're on Feline, if you're hitting 5 or more targets and you aren't trying to funnel a lot of healing into 1 or 2 of your allies, then spamming nothing but spinning crane kick is fine. On 5 targets or more, it's the most damage and the most overall throughput, but it is throughput that is spread out over 5 targets. If you're hitting less than 5 targets, you always want to be basically just spamming Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, and repeating those 2 buttons ad infinitum is the highest throughput, damage and healing on 5 targets or less, unless you're talking about a single target, in which case Rising Sun Kick is your highest damage and healing. And for the most part, when I play, if I'm hitting a pack of enemies, I just spam spinning crane kick. If I am doing the TP Bok spam, I usually don't throw in many Rising Sun Kicks. A neat trick here can be, you can press Tiger's Palm, get the 2 stacks, and then not press Blackout Kick until health bars start moving. And in that interim, you can just spam spinning crane kick. So you can you can get ready to have to spot heal with someone by fist weaving without needing to press the button straight away. But Rising Sun Kicks are a good way to get priority damage in if you want it. If you feel like your rem coverage isn't high enough, then you definitely want a Rising Sun Kick. Outside of those 4 abilities, the only things you're really worried about is using your rem charges. Now, generally I do this between pulls or as a pull starts or when someone starts taking damage, that sort of thing. I usually don't stop my damage rotation just to use a Renewing Mist. But if you know AoE damage is coming out, it can be a good idea to have as many rems out as possible. And then really, you can spot heal with your instant Vivify procs every 10 seconds. Now, the way this works is it doesn't, once you consume the buff, it doesn't wait 10 seconds to get another one. There is a constant rolling 10-second timer. So there will be times where you can use a Renewing Mist, use a Vivify, and then it'll come back straight away again, just because you've used it at near the end of that 10-second window. If for whatever reason you can't get your Feline Stomp down, or you can't fight on your Feline Stomp, and you need to keep up your Ancient Teachings buff, then you can press Essence Font. You don't want to channel the whole thing, just tap it to get the buff going, and then go back to your normal fist weaving abilities. As far as cooldowns go, you have Life Cocoon, which is your tank or external cooldown, which is much stronger than it was in the past, especially if you take the talent that makes it apply Renewing Mist and Enveloping to the target and increases the healing over time on that target. And then you have Revival, everyone knows and loves. And then outside of that, you also have Crane. So most Fistweavers are going to take Shiji, the red crane. And what this does is it's a by default 3-minute cooldown, and for 25 seconds every time you press like one of your damaging abilities, so spinning crane kick or rising sun kick or blackout kick, you will proc a smart heal gust of mist onto an injured ally. Each time those gusts proc, you also get a buff that reduces the cast time on your next enveloping mist by 33%, stacks to 3 times, so you can have an instant enveloping every 3 globals. Basically your 4th global is going to be a free, well, not a free, but an instant enveloping. Most people also talent into the Gift of the Celestials node that reduces the cooldown to 1 minute, but cuts the duration in half down to 12 seconds. This is just a really, really good cooldown for things like bosses when you're normal fist weaving healing on a single target where you don't get your blackout kick cleaves and your tiger spam cleaves and all that kind of stuff. When your fist weaving damage is low, your red crane is a good cooldown to press when you need higher throughput. I could also see bosses, especially tyrannical bosses, that actually take Yulon instead of red crane and then slightly adjust their talent builds to also take Mana Tea, so that on the long boss fights they could combine Mana Tea with Yulon to spam or use enveloping mists often, which give you your enveloping breath. I think that could be really good caster-based high throughput that you could still squeeze into a fist weaving build. As far as add-ons, macros, and keybinds go, all you really, in my opinion at least, all you really need is a couple of weak auras to track your cooldowns, or you want them on your action bars in good places that you're going to become quite accustomed to looking at. Macros I don't think are too important. If you really want to, you can get a macro that will drop your Ring of Peace, for example. Anything with a targeting reticle will drop it wherever your mouse cursor is without having to press the button to bring up the reticle to then click. You can remove the targeting kind of component or the green reticle component. And mouse over macros can be great for your casting on party frames or raid frames. As far as keybinds go, I would want to get extremely comfortable keybinds for spinning crank kick, tiger palm, blackout kick, and rising sun kick. Those are going to be the backbone of your playstyle. You're going to be pressing them very, very often. Thunder Focus T is your shorter term mid-range kind of cooldown. It's a 30-second cooldown that you can reduce with the Font of Life talent just below the Vivify talent. It gives all of your Essence Font initial healing bolts a chance to reduce the cooldown of your Thunder Focus T by 1 second. If you play around this, or just in general play, if you're pressing Essence Font between your Thunder Focus Ts, you might shave off somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds on the cooldown, so you might be looking at 20-25 second cooldown on Thunder Focus T. If you've talented it for it, you get 2 charges, and you can even get the extra random charge from Tea of Serenity or Tea of Plenty. But really for fist weaving, what most people are looking for here is to either use Thunder Focus Tea on Rising Sun Kick to reduce its cooldown, or to get Vivify to cost no mana if they're really trying to be frugal on their mana spending, or Renewing Mist to have the increased duration. Generally, it's only worth using TFT on Renewing Mist if you know party-wide damage is coming out and you want to make sure that you have high enough coverage on your rems to blanket everybody. Now in dungeons, you really don't need TFT to do this. Just pressing Rising Sun Kick with Rapid Diffusion is going to basically guarantee your rem coverage as long as you use your rem charges on 5 targets. Now apart from your general healing gameplay, Mistweaver utility is also quite good. Generally in dungeons, you want to pretty much always make sure that you're hitting every mob on every pack at least once, ideally right at the start of the pack, with something like Spinning Crane Kick as you run in to apply the increased magic damage taken debuff that monks apply passively. Like I mentioned earlier, Tiger's Lust is really nice for clearing movement impairing abilities. Leg Sweep and Ring of Peace are obviously great in keys, an AoE stun and an AoE knock. If you have a good binding for it, Expel Harm can be a great button to get used to pressing to top yourself off, usually while you're in between doing other things. If you want to, you can also channel Soothing Mist on yourself and then press Expel Harm, and you'll heal yourself with Expel Harm twice. You'll also get 2 Gusts of Mists hits on yourself. This can be really good for self-healing, for things like damage over time effects, or the kind of like targeted mechanic healing that you'll have to focus on in higher keys. It's a great way to heal yourself effectively and efficiently without relying on a cooldown, so that then you can use your other cooldowns or your higher throughput abilities on allies instead of yourself. As far as gear goes, for fist weaving specifically, most people go for as much haste as possible. Haste is just really good because it obviously allows you to react to things quicker. It's a good damage throughput stat and a healing throughput stat, and it reduces the cooldown on your Rising Sun Kick, which allows you to get more Renewing Mists out. Mastery at the moment, even for casters, generally isn't a very good stat to worry about or focus on at all. You want to avoid as much mastery as possible on your gear. I think most Mistweavers playing in higher keys are going to prioritize haste and versatility. Mostly versatility, even though it's slightly less healing overall and slightly less damage overall than Critical Strike. Versatility at least can be counted on all the time, and the damage reduction it's more and more useful the higher you get in keys. As far as defensive cooldowns go, monks can now take Diffuse and Dampen at the same time, which is really nice, and if they want it, Fort Brew. Fort Brew is the weakest of those cooldowns if you don't talent into improving it. Obviously for magic effects, Diffuse is the best. There are quite a lot of debuffs that go out and things in Mythic Plus in Dragonflight that you can just straight up ignore with Diffuse magic. For a lot of normal magic abilities, it effectively acts like an immunity. It will just stop you from getting the debuff at all. Now most people talent for Yulon's Whisper so that activating TFT does a little AoE heal around you. Most people talent for it because it's an efficient way to go down the Phalanx Stomp branch and take Ancient Teachings right next to it. But for the most part, you don't play around this talent at all. Like you don't think about the healing that talent does in your general gameplay. The same goes with the Feline Stomp. You're generally pressing that ability and worrying about the positioning of it and maintaining your buff uptime for ancient teachings and stuff, rather than the actual healing or even the essence font bolts that it throws out. As far as enveloping mist goes, again, that's a button that Fistweavers just generally don't press very much. I think if there are going to be keys or boss fights where you really want some strong casted healing, especially AoE healing or group healing, dropping Red Crane and taking Yulon instead, combining it with Mana Tea, and even taking Miswrap if you really want it, you'd have to drop something else on the tree, like Tea of Plenty, but I could see that being viable. But outside of that kind of cooldown that you're going to play around with enveloping, generally you aren't pressing enveloping for anything, even on the tank. Vivify is just so strong now that enveloping is really only going to be useful in situations where you know one target is going to take an absurd amount of damage. So it's not something that you never want to press, but it's not something that you're going to be pressing very often at all either. Unfortunately, a lot of the other talents just aren't really viable in a fist weaving build. And when I say other talents, I'm talking about the other kind of end of tree capstone kind of nodes, like Bone Dust Brew or Invoker's Delight, or even Secret Infusion. The main issue is at the moment that everybody takes Rising Mist, and the fact that you need to take the Feline Stomp branch means that if you're also going for Rising Mist, you don't really have the points to go anywhere else. You don't have the points for Bone Dust Brew, you don't have the points for Secret Infusion or anything like that. That being said, especially with high haste builds to get your Rising Sun Kick cooldown low enough, there could definitely be builds that don't need Rising Mist at all, which could free up 4 points or so on the tree, which might even allow people to go down and take things like Secret Infusion and Invoker's Delight. At the moment, that sort of build doesn't seem popular, but it could be something in the future. But I think that's pretty much it for now. If you have any questions or anything, throw them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and algorithm stuff.